Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please, thank you. Before I came on, I was informed that in about 30 minutes, the DJ next door is going to start playing really loud music, so I'm on the clock, and I want to, but thank you very much for having me, for the invitation and the opportunity that you've given me to be here with you today and to speak to you for a few moments. Thank you, Dennis, for that introduction. Dennis was the Speaker Pro Tem when I was the Speaker of the Florida House. That means he was the Vice Speaker, and there's a lot of reasons why I picked him. The main one was because he looks just like Dick Cheney, doesn't he? Look at that. He's just a little bit better shot, that's all. But I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today, and I'll try to be brief because I know you've got the rest of the program you want to get to, and you've had great speakers already today. The theme is it's tomorrow in America. But I think before we talk about America's tomorrow, it's so important to remember America's yesterday, because it's unlike anything in all of human history. There's never been a nation or a society like this one. And you know, sometimes when we say that, we almost take it for granted. You know, I was born in this country, been raised here my whole life. I have never known anything but freedom, peace, and prosperity. My parents knew a very different life. I'm a generation removed from a very different society. But I have never known anything but American-style freedom and prosperity. And so sometimes it's easy to take that for granted. And it's moments like these where we need to remind ourselves of how unique and special this society truly is. America, in many ways, is an extraordinary experiment, one not just in self-government, but in personal responsibility. We track back 230 some odd years when this nation was founded. It's important to remind ourselves that this nation wasn't really even founded on political principles. It was founded on spiritual ones. And what was that spiritual principle? It's pretty simple but profound. It's one that said that all people are created equal, and that the rights of every single person comes from their Creator, not from their king, not from their government, not from their constitution, not from their laws, not from their president, not from the judges. They come from your Creator. Think about what that meant back then, at a time when almost every person who had ever lived was governed by kings who believed that they were the sovereign and that their powers came to them from God, and that the power the people had was whatever power they allowed them to have. But our founding documents and the Declaration of Independence, and ultimately found its way into our Constitution, was based on a very profound idea, the notion that every single person on earth had value. That value came because your Creator endowed certain rights in you. The second step in that equation was limited government, American-style limited government, which also led to a free enterprise system. The result is that America is the freest and most prosperous society in all the history of mankind, ever. And it still remains that to this day. Even now, with the problems that we face, there isn't a country in the world that I would rather be. There isn't a nation on the earth that I would trade places with. And I bet you feel the same way. But for the record, this is not a teleprompter. It's a clock. I say, okay. Why did it work? Why was America so free and so prosperous? Was it because our Constitution was written better than the other constitutions? Other countries have tried the same thing. The reason why it worked is because the founders understood that the most important institution in society was not the government. They understood it then. In fact, they wanted limited government, very limited. They wanted government to do a handful of things that we couldn't do for ourselves. But the foundation of all of it, the reason why it worked, is because there were other institutions in society who did most everything. The strongest institution, the cornerstone institution of society that made these things possible is the family. I tell people every day, I was privileged. I am a child of privilege. And say, well, what do you mean? Your parents were rich? No. What do you mean? You went to Harvard or Yale? No. Well, what do you mean you were privileged? I had the strongest privilege anyone could possibly have. I was raised in a strong and stable family. It is by far the single advantage that you could give a child. The biggest advantage you could give a child is not some prepaid college plan. The greatest advantage you could give a child is a strong and stable family. I don't care how poor you are. I don't care how small your house is. I don't even care how overcrowded your schools may be. All these things matter, but you can overcome a lot in life if you are being raised in a strong and stable home, because the family is the cornerstone institution of all successful societies. That's how it's been. Beyond that, there's a civil society that helps support the families, like the faith community, like neighbors and friends. like people that live around you, who do not wait for government to act before acting themselves. And what made America successful is not that we had better transportation systems than other people. What made America successful is not that our government was better than the other governments, that our army was larger and more powerful. What made America successful is that we had a strong society where people did not sit back and wait for government to act. They did it themselves. There was a time in America, and in many places this is still the case, where people don't sit around and wait for the government transportation system to take an elderly neighbor to a doctor's appointment. They do it themselves. There was a time in America where families looked out for each other and where the faith community acted like a strong bond that helped us grow, no matter what denomination you may be. But over the last 40 or 50 years, this has slowly but surely been eroded for a bunch of different reasons that we simply don't have time to get into all of them today. But the bottom line is that the result has been a disaster on multiple fronts. The first is it's been a disaster because the destruction or the undermining of the American family and ultimately of the underpinnings of our culture have cost this nation trillions of dollars. Let's be frank, the United States government has spent literally trillions of dollars and spends billions of dollars a year trying to compensate for the destruction of the American family. And yet the more money they pour into it, the less it works. Look, I don't care how smart we are, how advanced we think we are, how far ahead we think we've gotten. We are not going to become the first society in human history that raises successful and productive people without parents. We're not. I don't care how small your class sizes are, how good your textbooks are, how well trained your teachers may be, or how much you pay them. If a child does not return home at night to a family and to a home that, if they need to, forces them to do their homework, children are going to struggle to learn and progress. These are fundamental truths. They're not political truths. They're not religious truths. They are truths gathered over 5,000 years of human history. They are things that work. And no matter how hard we try in our country, that will not change. Why do I say these things to you? Because, as some of you may have heard, I'm running for the United States Senate. And I often get asked the question by the press, and that is, well, are you a social conservative or are you a fiscal conservative? They try to create this separation. I always bring them back to the same point. You cannot separate the economic well-being of your people from their social and moral well-being. They are deeply linked. And in fact, this great, extraordinary story of America would be impossible without it. I'm saying these things to you because, number one, there's little government can do about a lot of this. You cannot regulate good parenting or strong families. Clearly, you can regulate or create impediments to it. But you cannot force people to be good parents or good families through laws. But you can, as a leader, make sure that government is not doing anything to stand in the way of the institutions that can help. The second thing is that the political platform gives us a platform to speak on these issues. Just like government spends money and time and effort explaining to people that if you smoke, you might get lung cancer, and if you eat too much fat, you might get heart disease, why should we be embarrassed to tell people that statistic after statistic makes it very clear that children that are raised by a mother and a father who are married and love each other do very well in life? The statistics make it very clear that children who were born and raised in strong and stable families have extraordinary advantages over children that do not. But the second and most important part of it is that moving forward we need to understand that government cannot replace these things. No matter how effective or large we try to grow our government, it cannot replace these institutions that made the American experiment possible.